Today we're starting a new series where we're exploring the sound of a single chord. And the chord that I've chosen for this episode is the major 7 sus4 chord. Now that's a chord that shows up in major and minor and all sorts of scales, yet it's something that I rarely use. So I've written a piece all based around the sound of that chord, and we're going to look at some of the ways that you might use it in your compositions. Let's start by looking at how to construct this chord. And I'm going to begin by playing a C major 7 chord and then morphing it into the C major sus4 chord. So our C major 7 chord would be the root, the third, the fifth, and the major 7. And if we want to change this into our C major 7 sus4 chord, we're going to take the third and move it up to the fourth. And that sounds like this. Such an interesting sounding chord. And to break it down a little bit further, if we were just to play the root, the fourth, and the fifth together, it's got that sus sound, as if it wants to go somewhere, but it's still fairly stable. It's a little ambiguous because we don't know if this would resolve to a major or a minor chord. It could go either way. It could go to C major, or it could go to C minor. Either way works. So it's a little ambiguous, but still, it's not really unstable until we add in that seventh. Let's listen to that. That changes everything. Now there's so much tension in this chord. We've got this major 7, which is a really dissonant interval, along with this tritone, another dissonant interval that really wants to go somewhere. And when we play it all together, it's that combination of this suspended sound and these dissonances. And it's just such an interesting chord. That's why I've called this piece suspended animation, because there's the suspended sound and that animated sound of wanting to move somewhere. All right, now let's look at how you might use this chord. One way to use this chord is to delay the resolution to the 1 chord. So if we were to play 1, 4, 5, 1, we can insert that major 7 sus4 chord between the 5 and the 1. So let's just hear what that sounds like. I think that can work very well, depending, of course, on the style of music that you're writing. Another way to use this major 7 sus4 chord is as a substitution for the 5 chord. If we look at our chord and take out the root note, the notes that we have left over are all of the important notes of that G7 chord, of the dominant chord. We're just missing the D. That would be the complete chord. So it's an interesting option of a chord that you might be able to use in place of the 5 chord. Let's hear what that sounds like. Those are a few examples of how you might think of this chord in kind of a functional harmony way. But you can also think of this chord as just a sound that you can use and really just sit on it. So if we were to take the chord, our C major 7 sus4, and then move to another major 7 sus4, let's say we'll move to F sharp major 7 sus4, but in inversion. That's a really nice sound, and it creates a whole world. Another thing I like to do, and I've done in this piece, is to use a common tone between chords. So say we take our C major 7 sus4 and move to a D flat major 7 sus4 in an inversion, but we'll keep the bass note, the C, constant. It's just such an interesting sound, and it creates this world, this suspended animation world. My idea for this piece is there's a impish character, a pixie, who's in a deep sleep in the wood, in moss, and maybe there's some sort of spell that's been cast on this creature, but now they're coming awake. Let's listen to the piece and we'll come back and break it down further. Let's look at this last page and this build-up. What I'm doing here is going back and forth between two of our major 7 sus4 chords. And I start with the G major 7 sus4 chord with a C in the bass, and then I move to a D flat major 7 sus4 here with the root in the bass. But as we move on and go back to the G major 7 sus4, now it's in another inversion, and then the D flat major 7 sus4, which is enharmonically spelled here, is in yet another inversion, and then finally back to the G major 7 sus4. So each of these chords have a very different voicing, yet they still sound cohesive, as if they belong together, even though these voicings are so radically different. Let's look at some of these voicings. Here's our first voicing, the G major 7 sus4, and I'm just going to play it from top to bottom. That's a really nice voicing. We've got the C in the bass. And also under all of these chords, we have a C pedal in this celeste. And the interesting thing about this is it's a chord tone in all of these chords. So even though it is a pedal, it is a chord tone in these chords. Here it is the fourth of the chord, and on the D flat major 7 sus4, it's the major 7. So let's just look at the voicings in the woodwinds here. So that's our first voicing, the G major 7 sus4. Now let's look at the D flat major 7 sus4. Now we start with this G sharp on the top. So this voicing has the D flat, the root in the bass, but don't forget that we have that C below it in the celeste. Then we move to yet another voicing, and this is of our G major 7 sus4. We start with a C on the top. Very different voicing. We've got this half step on the bottom, and the rest of the voicing is spread very wide. Moving on to the next, we have a major second on the top, then we go down a fourth to the C sharp, and then down a half step to the C. So this voicing has a more closed feeling than the other voicings. And then finally, we move back to the G, and it's got a spread voicing again, with this G way up on the top, then a C, then a D, and then an F sharp and G interlaced in there. That's the sound of that voicing. So let's listen to how all of these very different voicings work together over this C to create a cohesive sound, a sound that's meant to work together. I find this section to be very successful. The way that these voicings are helping to move us forward because they're ever changing, even though we're just switching back and forth between two chords. And I do realize that sometimes the voicings are suggesting a different tonality in their inversions. For example, that first G major 7 sus4 with the C on the bottom sounds like this. And that to me sounds like some sort of C Lydian sound, right? A sharp 11. But if we were to put the G on the bottom of that, we get the G major 7 sus4. So it is all of the DNA of a major 7 sus4, just in a different inversion, and it helps to keep it fresh as we move through those chords. All right, let's look at some ways that I've used the orchestration in the beginning of this piece. You'll realize that this is all woodwinds with harp and celeste, and let's see how we've used those woodwinds to their best advantage. For the woodwinds of this piece, I'm using 2 flutes, an alto flute, an oboe, English horn, 2 B-flat clarinets, a bass clarinet, and 2 bassoons. And one of the advantages of using woodwinds in this piece is that each one of these woodwinds has a unique and individual sound. So when we're writing lines like this, each one of these lines, each one of these instruments can be heard clearly. They don't have a homogeneous sound like the string section does, so they don't blend in the same way. And we're using that to our advantage. And when we have 2 sounds playing together, here the oboe 1 and the clarinet 1 playing in unison, when those sounds play together, we get another distinctive sound that we can use. Here where bassoon 2 takes the melody in this lower range, it can still be heard very clearly because it has a unique sound, especially in that range compared to the instruments that are playing the accompaniment. Let's listen to just the woodwinds here and how these lines work playing through our major 7 sus4 harmonies. You can really hear how those woodwind lines move through our major 7 sus4 harmony. You can hear each one of those lines and those combinations of instruments. It's an individuality that we're after here. In the very beginning, where the harp and celeste are playing, I've hocketed that melody, meaning I've broken it up and I've assigned little bits and pieces of it to different woodwinds. That way, the color is constantly shifting through those first couple of measures. I've really enjoyed this exercise of taking a single chord and just really listening to it, taking that time to see how it makes me feel, how I might use it. And we'll try more of these examples. We'll take other chords, other scales, other modes, and see what we can do with them. I hope this was beneficial to you, and I hope that you'll try some of these ideas. Let's listen one more time to suspended animation, and I'll see you all next time.